won't forget me, will you?
Me? Forget? Never.
The Wendys in the story are determined to get Peter to grow up and mature and evolve. After all, that's their job. That's what they've been doing since they had little plastic babies, dolls in strollers, as young children pushing them around. The main theme of the story is the conflict between remaining a child and knowing that no matter what, you eventually have to grow up. So it's that avoidance that we are seeing so much of today that keeps so many men Peter Pans for as long as possible. And there's many ways to do it, but we know that the end is coming. So that's the conflict. So the Peter Pan in the story makes the decision to actually give up Wendy and remain with the Lost Boys and spend his time there. So Wendy eventually grows up and he remains with these Lost Boys. And this is what men would rather do today. Some studies have revealed that men would rather sit with strangers in a pub watching a game they fairly like, rather than being home in an intimate relationship with the person they love the most, and perhaps kids as well. Peter represents the desire never to get older and never to mature as a person, but to remain immersed in imagination and a sense of play. Now that for me can be people being lost on the internet, in fantasy. Wendy's are portrayed as very maternal, and it is suggested that their role in life should be to nurture children. This has only been changing for the last 50 years. So it's a stereotypical depiction of the role of women in society. There's even a suggestion that Wendy is falling in love with Peter, but he tells her he thinks of her more as a mother figure in the story. Part of Peter's arrested development, his desire to be a child forever, is also wrapped up in a kind of Freudian conundrum in which he can only see the females in his life as potential mothers. I think Peter Pan and Wendy syndrome is for both sexes, and the roles can of course be reversed, and it's not that simple, but we keep it simple for now. The main lesson we can get from this is that you don't try and change your partner. That's distraction. You really try and change yourself, and you develop yourself and you grow yourself. If a partner doesn't want to grow up, that means he or she has work to do. It doesn't mean you have work to do on your partner. And this really contributes to a 50 to 52% divorce rate in our society today. Because the roles in relationships have literally been flipped upside down in the past couple of decades, there's so much confusion about what role do I play? Who should be submissive? Who should oppress? Who should take command? And this is causing a lot of the friction that we see today. It's a combination literally made in hell. And you often find that one partner becomes narcissistic while the other becomes depressed. Wendy's often become depressed in these dyadic relationships. The symbiosis goes out the window and everybody remains confused. And where there's confusion, there's conflict. So the sheltering and overprotection of the Wendy syndrome is likely to come across as hardcore, authoritative parenting. And the last thing that Peters want is another mother, especially when they don't want to grow up. So it's reincarnated even into the children as they watch these dynamics unfold in our marriages today. Children do as they see and not hear. So they watch the fights for domination and control. They're not stupid. They know that often dad is at least trying to be ruled by Wendy. And it's not a pretty sight. Adult babies are ugly. Adult babies are just not attractive. Peter can do it, but Wendy does it. This makes him feel incompetent and useless. She calls it love, but it's not love. It may be love addiction, sure. It may be codependence, but it's not love. So he sits in front of the TV playing video games, or perhaps golf, browsing the internet, anything to keep him on the playground. We have to learn not to mother our partners as much as relate to them. After all, it is called a relationship. You've got to take on your role and nurture that role rather than trying to do for someone else what they can actually do for themselves. It's a kind of enabling trap that just does not work. As we said before, it leaves one partner depressed and angry and the other acting like a narcissist. In this story, it's important, now listen to those high divorce rates. It's important to understand that in the story, Peter suggests that Wendy come with him to Neverland. She brings her brothers and they go through and they create like a makeshift family with the lost boys. And we see how that does not work. And this is what we mean by being cautious of rearing your child in a Wendy and Peter Pan syndrome home. She does her job. She tries to nurture Peter. She tries to make him grow up. But in the end, it doesn't work and Peter makes his choices. She then eventually gives up on the idea and returns home to her family of origin that she starts to miss. When Wendy's mother hears about the Lost Boys, she offers to adopt the children and take care of them. And this story that was told so long ago is more prevalent today than ever. Grandmothers are taking care of the lost children in split families over half the time. And we've really got to do something about this. If we cannot see an unfolding today, how on earth does the story depict it so well so long ago? Peter Pan has an insatiable thirst for adventure. He loves to be out there and always doing something exciting and new, much like he learned in his video games as a child. So Peter is out there looking for uncertainty, for adventure. He's curious and he loves those things far more than he loves Wendy and the family. While adults must grow up, get educations, pursue careers, and leave the kind of impulsive life behind, children have the privilege of going on for any number of years and living an adventure that can be decided in a moment. How different that is to the responsibility that is required for being a husband, a father, a friend. So the original play of Peter Pan is filled with instances of magic and daring and adventure, of course. They do the impossible and fly. So the interesting part is when Peter first teaches the children to fly, he says to them, think happy thoughts. So when Peter Pan syndrome kicks in, those happy thoughts are challenged, and this is the conflict. The minute unhappy thoughts come in, we go into fantasy land. We disappear into a pink cloud rather than deal with our situations like an adult. So that brings us to the point of adult responsibility. A major reason Peter does not want to grow up is because he doesn't want that adult responsibility. He wants to play. Overprotection of parents can lead children to develop the Peter Pan and Wendy syndromes. It usually affects dependent people, codependent people who have been overprotected by their families and haven't developed the necessary skills to confront life. So the Peter Pans essentially are representing a society that we see today, which is glorifying youth and adolescence, not wisdom, and restraint and responsibility as it was done in the old days. We wanted to leave home and take the responsibility of a carer. Today, it's more about being relevant, being reflexive, and being fun. So Wendy's need to feel empowered in a relationship. They need to feel like they're doing their part in the relationship, even more than their part, to make sure that the system or the nest that they are creating actually works as best as it can. Wendy's can even be hysterical if they don't get their way, but the hysteria has nothing to do with maturity either. These are adult tantrums, the same as children who don't get their way. So it's just a different form. It's coming out in a different form. So Wendy's intentions are good. She's trying to get Peter to grow up and take that responsibility. And yes, she is capable of it. She needs a partner who's going to navigate the storms of life with her. But to cross the line from authenticity to inauthenticity, from trying to make a nest into a distraction where your nest is no longer relevant unless you can get Peter to grow up, then we have an epidemic called the Peter Pan and Wendy syndrome. So Peter Pans and Wendy's are both immature. They are both learning and doing their best. That we know. It's not a case of someone failing. It's more a case of people learning how to navigate life and navigate growing up. Life demands that we grow up. It insists that we mature, take responsibility, and create something. Whether it's beautiful or hell, whether it's order or chaos, is really up to us at the end of the day. So what we can do in terms of growing up on both sides is take responsibility, but listen, take responsibility for ourselves. That's the key. Take responsibility for ourselves, not for the other person. You might have to do work to move on. You might have to do work to grow even further than still remaining codependent and trying to cling on to what doesn't work. At the end of the day, Peter Pan may have to give up those happy thoughts from time to time. Responsible thoughts are not always happy. Life is difficult and it requires some sadness and some happiness. It requires balance. It doesn't allow us to only experience one side of life. It needs us to experience both sides: love, hate, loneliness, companionship, and so on it goes. So there are 10 signs that Peter Pan and Wendy syndrome is alive and kicking in a relationship. One is the partner doesn't like to continue conversations about adult topics. That's quite easy to see. Secondly, they live in a dream world with loads of ideas, but no action. 3, they like the jest or the clown role at social events. They dodge the adult talk, they remain quiet, they withdraw from any responsible adult-like conversations. 4, they still rely on others, especially their parents. Always bring the parents to the party. And whenever there's a decision to be made, bring in those parents or caregivers to make them on their behalf. 5, he or she is self-centered. Everything is about the self. So it's more, me than any kind of we. He's addicted to Tinkerbell's fairy dust and may love drugs. Being out with the boys, far more. Anything that gets that Tinkerbell dust to create a fake sense of feeling good, a fake sense of feeling and thinking happy thoughts. He loves hanging around with the Lost Boys a little too much. That's a sign. That make light of everything to the point of annoyance and never really deliver. They are unemployed a lot of the time and can't hold down a steady job and blame it on bad breaks. I have had a bad break in life. And number 10 is fear of commitment. Staying undecided and always in limbo and in drama is a sure sign of a Pan. And finally, Wendy's are lacking in their own self-concept. They need to nurture and change the partner so that they can feel that self-concept be whole. Wendy's believe that their mates cannot survive without them. The truth is their mates are unwilling, but they're not unable to shoulder the responsibility that's causing all these problems. So they fall into a role of child, and the Wendy syndrome means you're going to be a mothering wife. It unfortunately does come with the stereotypical possessiveness, complaining, trying to induce guilt on your partners for them to change. But none of this really works. I mean, being a martyr, falling into the drama triangle, is not going to help anybody. So what you want to do is develop a very good self-image. Get certainty into where you are going in your life. Have a meeting about it and then head towards that. Even if your ship has to sail alone for a while, you know that the other partner will need to seek help. There is no way that one ship can sail and leave one person back on the shore and have this relationship work. Both have to at least relate. Wendy and Peter Pan have to. If they are going to be in a relationship, so to speak, they are going to have to sail off together. And leaving the shore is not easy. And that's something that growing up requires. It demands it, in fact. Leaving the Wendy syndrome behind is about creating playful, realistic intimacy. This is all a problem developed around avoidance of intimacy, failure, covered by perfectionism. Being intimate, loving, and expressing authentic opinions about what you want, what you're afraid of, and what you need to do is the way forward to healing any relationship from the Peter Pan and Wendy syndrome.